research that we have done, report that we have done at the ICT, the Institute for Counter-Terrorism, 2 years ago and a year ago. This report actually ended with a recommendation to the Israeli government to consider a prevention war against Hezbollah as an Israeli initiative. So it didn't happen, but what did happen is that we have been dragged to a war against Hezbollah because he actually initiated and triggered us to do so. And at least for the time being, it seems that we have a clear upper hand and doing a remarkable job. I have to admit that in my view, even it's better than what I would expect.
I'm here sitting with Boaz Ganor, the president of the Reichman University. Boaz is, of course, sitting in Tel Aviv, no, actually in Herzliya, and I'm sitting in Melbourne, Australia. So welcome, Boaz. It's been a long time.
Thank you for having me, Albert. And it seems that you're sitting just next to me, not so far away down there.
Yeah, same. And of course, last time I saw you, we were in your shelter, and we were on the receiving end of the 200 or so cruise missiles from Iran.
Yeah, that makes us blood brothers now, you know.
Yeah, brother in bombs.
Yes.
And you remember those? It was not a joke because your building was shaking. And you remember all the vibrations and the booms outside. We did not know what was going on.
No,
and so
no, we just,
yeah. That guessing, yeah.
It was one of the worst attacks, if not the worst attack on Israel ever, when you had 181 ballistic missiles being launched all together simultaneously to Israel. Each one of them has a very big warhead. It's not, chicken feed coming from Gaza. It's really a product of the Iranian military industry. And you don't know where it hits. And as you said, we heard the booms. Although we've been in a closed shelter, it was very clear that the danger is real.
Yeah, and I heard that those cruise missiles, they each carried between 500 and 1,000 kilos of TNT each.
Yes.
That's so. In other words, you had between 100 and 200 tons of TNT thrown at Israel, basically.
Right.
So that was quite a large attack by any measurements.
Mm-hmm.
It's still not in the category of an atom bomb, but so I don't want to start with Iran. I wanted to start with a more general question. Now, as the president of the Reichman University and an expert in counter-terror that you are, I would like to know what is now your perspective in the current situation with the various fronts, with the threats that Israel is facing in terms of capabilities, in terms of defense capabilities, of course, of Israel, and Israel's capacity to respond. So if we enumerate them, so you've got the threat from the north with Hezbollah, you've got still the Gaza, you've got the West Bank that's opening up, you have Iraq, on the Far East, you have the Houthis in the south, and you've got Iran. So,
first of all, a word of warning. You invited me to give this talk or discussion with you, and I hardly represent myself. I'm not an official, and therefore, the ideas that I would share with you and with our friends are my own ideas, and in some cases, sometimes even in many cases, are different from others in Israel, maybe even from the government point of view. So, but you asked me, so I
didn't expect any less from you. We're having a candid discussion, and absolutely.
Yes. So I would suggest to differ between three types of threats that Israel is facing for the last year, actually facing even before the last year, but it was activated in the last year, which are simultaneously connected. The first threat, I refer to that as a tactical threat, no more than that, and this is Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad threat coming from Gaza. I would like to argue that Hamas, even after the 7th of October, even at the 8th of October, didn't pose to Israel more than a tactical threat. Although the Israeli Prime Minister defined the war on the 7th and the 8th, and since then, until today, against Hamas as an existential war for Israel, I beg to differ. It was not, it is still not an existential threat to Israel. It's a war that Israel chose to fight, and rightly so, has all the legitimacy in the world, has all the good reasons why this war should have been erupted by Israel, but we should call a spade a spade. This is a tactical problem that we are dealing for the last year, and with a lot of success. If it would have been up to me, I would end this war quite a few months ago. I would end this war half a year ago when most of the military achievements have been achieved. I do believe that every day that we are spending now in Gaza, without trying to find the day after solution for the region, for the territory, it's a waste of time, it's a waste of life, and we are actually dragged into a senseless war of attrition. One would say, wait a minute, but a few days ago you killed Sinwar. Maybe if you would have taken my advice and end the war a few months ago, Sinwar would not die as an outcome of that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, as many other Israelis, of course, saw it in a very good eye to see Sinwar dying. He really deserved that in the most horrible possible way. Nevertheless, this is still not a strategic or existential threat to Israel, this Sinwar. And let me tell you more than that. If we would have left, if we would have ended the war a few months ago in Gaza, Sinwar, I can guarantee, would not stay alive for a long period of time. I wouldn't give him an insurance policy for his life. Israel doesn't forget villains and terrorists like him and get rid of them at the end of the day. So that is not, in my view, an excuse for the senseless activity in Gaza right now.
Mm-hmm.
Hezbollah is a different ballgame. Hezbollah was and still is a strategic threat to Israel. Strategic threat to Israel, meaning can impose on Israel damage in the amount that would cause strategic problems to Israel, to the Israeli industry, to the Israeli home front, to the Israeli tourism, to many Israeli interests and aspects altogether. And I can now reveal that, maybe we'll talk about it later on, about the research that we have done, report that we have done at the ICT, the Institute for Counter-Terrorism, 2 years ago and a year ago. This report actually ended with a recommendation to the Israeli government to consider a prevention war against Hezbollah as an Israeli initiative. So it didn't happen. But what did happen is that we have been dragged to a war against Hezbollah because he actually initiated and triggered us to do so. And at least for the time being, it seems that we have a clear upper hand and doing a remarkable job. I have to admit that, in my view, even it's better than what I would expect in achieving our goals in not demilitarizing, but diluting the military capability of Hezbollah enormously, and also do something which is crucial, and this is, if you wish, cleaning the immediate Lebanese territory on the border of Israel, which was the main compound of the Radwan forces of Hezbollah, planning and preparing to infiltrate to Israel and raid to Israel in the way that the Nukhba did in the south. They plan to do it in the north. Actually, the Nukhba in the south, the Hamas took the whole plan from Hezbollah and imitated that, but with much less capabilities than Hezbollah had. And now we are actually exterminating this capability every day with quite a good success on that. The third challenge that Israel is facing is the existential challenge. And this is Iran. This is not Hamas. This is not Hezbollah. This is Iran. This is a Iraq regime, Islamist fundamentalist dictatorship, if you wish, that swore from the day that they've been created, funded in late 70s, that they have an operative goal to exterminate Israel. No lesser than that. They don't try out. That's what they're saying. And that's what they are doing. And that's what they are preparing. Everything we discussed until now are long arms of Iran. Iran actually funded Hamas, funded Palestinian Islamic Jihad, funded Hezbollah, give them the munition, the training, the know-how, and use them as proxies. And you mentioned the Houthis in Yemen, and you mentioned the Shiite militias in Iraq and in Syria. All of that is being created by the monster Iran, which is
the head of the snake.
The head of the snake, or the head of the octopus, if you wish, that is doing their best in order to exterminate us and running for the nuclear bomb that might give them the possibility to materialize the goal that they set to themselves. That's the existential threat to Israel. On that tariff, we do not have yet, it could change within a few minutes, but we do not have yet a lot of success. We cut some of the arms of this octopus. We dismiss the strangling plan that they had on the Israeli neck. We opened that, but the existential threat is still there and still was not dealt nor by Israel or by United States or other allies of Israel. And that's something that we would see in the coming days, how it would develop.
So we have not heard yet an Israeli response to Iran, but just recently there was a leak from the White House to a Telegram account that is associated with Iran, revealing the preparations of the Israeli plans. You heard of this, I'm sure.
Yes.
How is that affecting Israel? Do they have to go back to the drawing board? Do you know anything about what's happening in that front?
From what I read, it's all something that already very well known. You can read it from open sources. The fact that it's written top secret on top of that, it doesn't change anything. So what they said that Israel was doing some kind of a preparation for a big attack against Iran. The Air Force did a large drill, have launched 40 or 60 missiles, long-range missiles, the missiles that might be used by the Israeli Air Force against Iran from long distance, and also fueled the Israeli aircraft, military aircraft in mid-air. Okay. If you would have been asked me before the leak, what would happen, I would probably describe this to you as well. It didn't say anything about what would be the targets. It didn't say anything about what would be the magnitude of the operation and what would be the timing of the operation. At least for the time being, this was not revealed, and this is really the secret information that we don't know.
Yeah, that makes sense. Let's go back to what you said before, that in Gaza you would have stopped the war. How would that have given the possibility of getting some more hostages out of Gaza, do you think? Would it have
It's tightly
helped?
connected. It's tightly connected. I, for once, supported from day one, actually, a deal with Hamas in order to exchange the Israeli hostages with quite a few, actually many, convicted terrorists in Israel. I have to say that for a long period of time, as a counterterrorism expert, I was against these kinds of deals, especially when they are unproportional. But there is no precedent to what happened in Israel. There is no precedent of kidnapping of more than 250 Israeli hostages, elderly people, Holocaust survivors, kids, mothers, and so on and so forth. And this, in my view, an ultimate Israel responsibility that represent the Israeli value system and Israeli strength to freedom. That is the obligation of the Israeli government. Unfortunately, I'm not sure the government fully agree with me on that. Now, how does this connected to what I've said before? Look, Yahya Sinwar didn't just happen to kidnap those Israelis. It was pre-planned. It's part of the overall ordeal that they prepared for us. It's part of the concepts that Iran actually brought to the table for Hezbollah and for Hamas. And the reason was to serve as some kind of insurance policy for Hamas leaders, and of course to force Israel to free convicted terrorists. So from day one, Sinwar said, from the 8th of October, I'm ready to free the hostages, but I have three demands. The first one is to end the war. The second is Israeli withdrawal from Gaza Strip. And the third one is to free prisoners. I'm not sure that they already got into the nitty-gritty of how many, for how many. That was not on the table as far as I know. The Israeli government said exactly the opposite. The Israeli government said, we are not going to end the war. I'm talking about since the 8th of October until yesterday. We are not going to end the war. We are not going to get out of Gaza Strip. Yes, we're ready to free prisoners, but we didn't even start to talk about that. So now let's talk. Of course, there is no starter here. The Americans did whatever they can in order to bridge the gap between Israel and Sinwar. And they came with this idea that if we cannot reach an overall deal that would free all the hostages, let's try to reach a stages deal with three stages. In the first stage, we will go for humanitarian efforts, remain kids and women and elderly people. And then we will have the second phase and then the third phase. At the end of the third phase, we'll get to what Sinwar wanted, which is the end of the war, cessation of the war, and withdrawal from Gaza Strip. But we are not talking about the second and the third stage. Only the first stage is now on the table. And Sinwar at first didn't want that because he didn't believe that Israel will get to the second, the third phase. But then he said, after a lot of persuasion coming from the United States, and more than that, United States came to, and by the way, at the same time, the Israeli government said, forget about the second and the third stage. We are not going to end the war. We are not going to get out of Gaza. And he was listening to them. Mm-hmm. But then the United States came to Sinwar and said to him, we guarantee that there will be a second and third phase. Forget about Israel. We guarantee that this would be. When the Israeli prime minister heard about that, he went public and said, don't believe the Americans. I'm telling you, I'm not going to end the war. I'm not going to step out of Gaza. And immediately, a few hours after that, Hamas gave an official refusal to the American offer.
So this is acting as though Bibi definitely didn't want to have any ceasefire. Is that so?
No. Ceasefire, we would agree to ceasefire, I believe. He would agree for the first stage, which would bring a ceasefire. but he wouldn't agree to the connection of the first stage to the second and the third, which would lead clearly, deterministically, to the cessation of the war and the withdrawal of Israel from Gaza. That's something that he was not prepared. Maybe he was right. I don't think so.
Well, that's consistent with what he said from the beginning, which is
yes,
to dismantle
yes. Everybody
Hamas.
stood in the Hamas and Israel held their consistent views from day one until this very moment. For me, as a person who's persuaded that Israel, from Israeli interests, forget about the hostage deal for 1 minute. Israel should have ended the war a few months ago, 6 months ago, 5 months ago, in order to recover the economy, recover the military, in order to rebuild the IDF after losing about 5,000 Israeli soldiers. Some of them are dead, some of them are injured.
But 1,000 are dead and 4,000 are injured. I think those are the figures, yeah?
I think that the number that I know is about 5,000 soldiers altogether. If you take under consideration PTSD and so on and so forth.
So they're out of action, but only about 1,000 are dead.
No, more than that, 1,200 or something like that.
Okay, so that's
and in order to regain international support, in order to build our military warehouses, rocket warehouses, and bombs, and so on and so forth, we need all of that. And instead of that, we dragged ourselves into a war of attrition, useless. Doesn't change our strategic position there, and we could have found some kind of regional solution to Gaza, work together with our friends in the region, Egypt, Gulf countries, and others, and start rebuilding Gaza. Now, you ask me who will run Gaza in the future? Let me tell you something.
No, I'm not asking you this, but let me ask you something in between.
Let me just finish this with your permission. Let me tell you something. The one that will run Gaza will be the one that will rebuild Gaza. If it will be Hamas, Hamas will run Gaza, regardless how much he would suffer from Israel. If it would be the regional force with the Gulf countries and Saudi Arabia, these people would control Gaza. And this is why this is an Israeli interest to end the war. Now, on that regard, the last sentence, with your permission, on that regard, the hostage deal is not the problem, is the solution to the problem, because it would bring to the cessation of the war, and it would bring the hostages back home.
Yes. No, there was a good segue. You didn't allow me to do it, because there is another front that Israel is fighting, and that's the information war. And that one, we all know that Israel is losing that information war. And I was going to simply ask you to develop this idea that effectively, if Israel had ceased that war about 4 or 5 months ago, it would have helped the other front, which is the information war, without really impending the capacity or the capabilities of Israel to finishing the job with Hamas. Do you agree with that?
Agree with that 100%. And I would add to that, on the information war, you need to think out of the box. At the beginning of the war, I gave a recommendation to whoever was ready to listen to me. Why won't we parachute food and supply, humanitarian food and supply in Gaza? Well, one would say, but Hamas will take over that. First of all, Hamas is taking over even the convoy. Okay, but it shows the international community that Israel cares for the simple Gazans that suffer from the war. And it's cheap. It doesn't risk the Israeli soldiers' life. It brings some international support. But we are very good tacticians, but very bad strategic thinkers. And the information war is a strategic war that time after time we are losing in the international arena.
I remember more than 20 years ago, you gave me a private lecture to explain to me how the mind of a terrorist was working. And I remember that one of the factors was the motivation. The operational capabilities was the other one. But it is that motivation that while Israel is winning, there is no doubt that it is motivating the enemy. And effectively, what you are talking about would be part of the working it the other way to
Yes.
actually walk it back a bit.
Yeah, trying to neutralize that in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. But you remind me things that we 20 years ago, when we were 15 years old, had in mind. But it was true back then, and it's definitely true today. I mean, while you are fighting, and that's the main and the most important thing, soldiers are risking their life fighting in Gaza. You need to keep their life. You don't need to risk them for psyops and for information warfare. But you can do so many things without risking them, without damaging their efforts to win the war militarily wise. And the Jewish DNA doesn't fully comprehend that, in my view.
Yes, and last week we had a great interview with Itamar Marcus from the Palestinian Media Watch. And what came out of that very loud and clear is that the hatred towards Israel and the Jews by those populations has been there since the time of al-Husseini. And it is very deeply seated in their culture. Al-Husseini was already responsible for the massacre in Hebron in 1929, which resembles a lot to what happened in October 7. So the playbook had already taken place, and that was even before the atrocities of Hitler. They already happened in 1929. So, and today, from what Itamar showed us, the hatred is still there. So at the end of the day, I'm wondering whether the Israelis and the government of Israel hasn't learned from that and thinking, well, what's the point? Is there in Israel now that feeling of what's the point with these populations? There's nothing we can do. Is that, I had a little bit of that when I was there last time.
Yes, there is. Unfortunately, there is. I'm saying unfortunately, because I think this should not be the conclusion, in my view. First of all, let me tell you that Itamar and I are very good friends for more than 30 years. And we first met.
You were 5 years old then.
Yeah, exactly. We first met 30 years ago when both of us have been nominated officially to be members of the Trilateral Committee, Israeli, American, Palestinian Committee, after the Oslo Accords, to monitor incitement. And I was responsible for school books. He was responsible for media, Palestinian media. And you could see back then how this very well planned, unfortunately, very well planned structure that have been built in the Palestinian Authority, of course, in other places as well, but we're talking about the Palestinians right now, of educating the youngsters for hatred, for not accepting Israel's existence in any way, in any territory, even if it's small as Tel Aviv area or whatever. And you saw that it's growing and growing and growing. My efforts at that time was trying to change the school books. I said, well, this generation is lost, but maybe we can see to it that the next generation would be exposed to other messages. Unfortunately, I failed, and all of us have failed. But I refuse to lose hope. I refuse to lose hope because let me tell you something, Albert. If I would lose hope, if I would believe that there is nothing that can be done in order to change this set of mind of the Palestinians, even in the far future, I would immigrate to Sydney, the best city in the world. I wouldn't live here. No, to tell you the truth.
Sydney is and Melbourne It's not ideal in Australia right now.
I know. But what I'm trying to say is that one cannot live in Israel, especially not a secular Jew, can live in Israel without clinging to hope that in the future something would change in this regard. Because why I say secular Jew? Because if you are a religious Jew, who cares? I mean, Messiah would come, he will solve everything, everything would be okay. Well, I don't see it happening tomorrow morning, nor in my lifetime or my kids' lifetime. Therefore, I need to do something to change that. And let me tell you something. We started to talk about rebuilding Gaza. At the end of the day, Gaza has to be rebuilt. There are some messianic Israelis that just yesterday had a conference in Israel how to rebuild Israeli settlements in Gaza. That's the way they think about rebuilding Gaza. Well, excuse me, I think this is lunacy. We don't need to have Jews being settled in Gaza surrounded with millions of Palestinians, and then we are multiplying our problem. But we need to think how we take advantage of the miserable situation in Gaza right now in order to force a different education system in Gaza, a different type of school books, with the help of the Sunni countries that already has normalization with Israel, has peace with Israel and others. That's the way we need to invest our time. It won't change the attitude towards Israel in the coming years, maybe not even the coming decade or two, but maybe within the next generation, we would see the good fruits and benefits of such an effort.
One has to wonder, though, despite all the horrific images and so on, countries like Australia have offered some refugees of Gaza to come to Australia in limited numbers. And there is quite a controversy about this because the vetting process has been seriously questioned. But when you speak to the Arab countries, like I happen to know the Moroccans very well, and I was getting a few criticism by my Moroccan friends as to what Israel was doing in Gaza. I had a very simple question for them: is how many Palestinians from Gaza have you taken to Morocco? Have you offered any refugee status to anyone? And of course, the question was evaded very quickly. But you can ask that question to everyone in the Middle East, including Lebanon, including Syria, including Jordan, including the Egyptians, including the UAE, the Saudis, the Iranians. There's no, well, they're not Arabs, but they are in the conflict. None of those countries have offered any Gazans a refugee status or a path to citizenship in the country. They are simply not welcome anywhere. Why do you think that is?
There are two reasons for that. First of all, they know better. I mean, the Australians have done this mistake, and history repeats itself every few decades. As we all know, the Australians imported Lebanese immigrants when the civil war was in Lebanon in the 70s. It's coming from a very good will of the Australians, but although they sent their delegations to screen the Lebanese that would come, and probably they were looking for the Christian Lebanese that suffered a lot in this civil war. It happened that they brought immigrants from Lebanon, mainly, as far as I know, Shiites that definitely do not represent the value system of Australia altogether. And it seems that history repeats itself right now. So the first reason is that the Arab countries know better. They had also experience, if you remember, during the first Lebanese war, excuse me, in early 80s, Israel is forced Arafat and his troops out of Lebanon, and they have been scattered in 7 or 8 Arab countries. And for years, those Arab countries suffered a lot from riots, from criminal activity coming from those elements altogether. They don't want them. But there is another reason, which is more ideological reason. They do not accept Palestinians, because the Arab countries want to sustain the problem with Israel. Immigration to other countries and assimilation in those countries might end the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in a way, or at least lose the tension of the problem. And this is the only example in history which I'm familiar with that immigrants from a conflict area that immigrates to other country still claim that they have rights and they have interests in the previous.
Yes, they keep their refugee status.
Land.
Yeah, they keep their refugee
status. You could see those immigrants wearing a key in a necklace, that the key represents the so-called key to their old home, not their old home, their grandparents' old home in Tel Aviv suburbs and other places, representing the so-called right to reoccupy Tel Aviv, reoccupy the center of Israel. And although they now live happily ever after in for even 2 generations or 3 generations in European countries, in the United States, in
and that comes back to the status of the Palestinians. They have a privileged status with UNRWA under the UN. It started in 1948. All other countries have the UNHCR for the refugee status, but they have a special status. But this is a different subject, and I'm happy to do a special session just on that, because there's so much to dig into in that subject. Let's go back to Iran, and I want to ask you a question, given that you and I are brother in bombs, as we established at the beginning of this conversation. We saw what potential devastation these bombs that were thrown at Israel on the 1st of October. And if Israel didn't have this defense mechanism that they have, there would have been lots of people dying in Israel. There's no doubt. And if you talk to me about a proportionate response, I think the proportionate response should be 200 tons of TNT on Iran anywhere you want. You just name the area, and it's fair game to go and put 200 tons of TNT on Iran. That would be proportionate. But given what we saw and the potential devastation and the carelessness of those people, because, you know, they were sending those rockets right into areas of civilian populations. And by any international definition, that is a crime against humanity. You know, they did not target specifically, well, maybe they targeted a few military, but certainly the ones that were exploding overhead from where we are, from where you live, that was a complete populated area of Israel. And I'm just wondering, the moment those people have an atom bomb, in your heart of heart, will they hesitate to use it?
Well, it's a $1 billion question, not even $1 million question.
So I'm asking you to tell me, because you've got the gut feel, as you've been doing this all your life. What is your gut feel on this?
Let me tell you, you're part of the Jewish DNA. And with the Jewish DNA, we learned through history that when you have dictators that swear to exterminate us, you should believe them. That at least this is the real intention. And when you have those dictators that declare for decades that they want to exterminate us, and suddenly has the capability to do so, you definitely need to believe them. So I wouldn't underestimate a bit the threats of the possible use of the Iranians, the nuclear bombs, once they would have the capability. Furthermore, this is not just dictators. This is Islamic fundamentalist dictatorship that believes in Armageddon. In the Shiite belief, there is this sense of Armageddon, and this starts to become an irrational behavior or analysis, if you wish. And if you add that to the equation, it's risk multiplier altogether. Having said that, the Iranians are strategic thinkers, and they play their cards in a, I would say, cautious manner. Once they would have the nuclear bomb, I don't think that immediately they would use it against Israel. And I tend to believe that they would use it as deterrence against Israel, against United States, against regional countries, while they will try to take over physically, or at least spread their hegemony in the Middle East. I think that the immediate risk to the Gulf countries, to Saudi Arabia, to the Sunni countries, is no lesser, maybe even bigger than the risk that Israel would have once Iran would become nuclear. This is the reason why there is a need and joint interest of those countries to unify their efforts with Israel in order to prevent Iran from becoming nuclear. And I would add to that another thing. As expert as I am, I don't know the answer. What is really the Israeli capability, conventional capability, to prevent Iran from reaching the goal of building nuclear bombs? And I'm talking in plural, not even single. This is probably a mission that has to be done by some kind of an alliance, Western alliance, led by United States, together with Israel, together with the Gulf countries, together with the Sunni countries, some kind of a second NATO. Not because Israel is shying out of that, because Israel, I'm not sure, is capable of destroying the multiple facilities that are being spread all over Iran in an underground manner in all of those places. So this is why I think that we need to synchronize our efforts with the United States. And that's what I think Israel is doing right now. This is limiting our capability as well. You know, we are days before the election in United States. United States is a strategic ally of Israel. We cannot dismiss that. As we speak, we have American soldiers deployed in Israel and outside Israel in order to defend Israel. We cannot turn a blind eye to that. We need to respect their needs, and we need, in my view, to coordinate our proportional or not proportional attack against Iran in a way that would not harm the American interests right now. I think that the Americans are in favor of an attack, a severe attack against Iran, but they forbid or dismiss some kind of targets at that particular period of time.
Boaz, we've got Alan Howe that has finally joined us. Hello, Alan.
G'day, thank you.
Okay,
G'day,
so
Boaz.
that works. The computer finally fired up.
Yeah, you can't see it, Albert, but I'm pedaling beneath the desk.
To keep the electricity going. So I want to invite all our friends to use the box, you know, the one under the screen that has a question mark that enables you to type a question, and Alan will see it. And Alan will join us in asking also your question to Boaz in a minute. Alan, do you have any questions for Boaz? Have you thought about anything that you want to ask?
Yes, a couple, Albert. Boaz, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, you don't hear anything about him these days, but I see he's still a senior figure in Tehran. He, even by Iranian standards, especially the leadership standards, he was quite extreme. And he said in an anglicized phrase in his own language, he said that Israel needed to be wiped from the map. Not a thing that they would normally say, not terminology they would normally use. But it's clear what he meant by that. And I think once he said that, it was almost incumbent upon Israel to prepare to destroy any nuclear facility they had that could be weaponized. Is that right?
Well, as said, when these kind of people are saying what they're saying, I do believe them, that at least that's what they're trying to achieve. You know, in Iran, they built in one of the main circles in Tehran, they built a large clock that counting down to the year of 2040, in which they argued that this would be the ultimate year that Israel will be eliminated from Earth. I do believe that after the 7th of October, they will push this clock faster because they had this false feeling that they can achieve the goal sooner than later. Maybe after the Israeli success in contending with the main proxy in the region, Hezbollah, they think twice. The nuclear problem is something that should keep us awake at night and awake a day, and we need to figure out how to create the international alliance that would contend with that problem. Let me share with you an anecdote. In 2010, I was invited to a discussion with the person that was back then the head of the National Security Council of United States, General Jim Jones. It was under Obama. And the meeting was held in the White House. And he surprised me with the first question when I came to him. He said to me, "Tell me, Boaz, would a yellow light be enough for Israel to make the decision to attack Iran?" A yellow light like a light in the street, you know, the red, yellow, and green. And I, in a very untypical Israeli manner, i.e. in a humble manner, I said, "What do you mean? Why do you ask me this question? I'm a counterterrorism expert, not a nuclear expert. You know, you have the Israeli ambassador here in Washington, D.C. You have the military attaché. Ask them." He said, "I'm asking them, but I'm interested in your personal belief. What do you think? A yellow light should be enough for Israel to make the decision to attack Iran?" And I said to him, "If you ask me, even a green light should not be enough for Israel to make the decision to attack Iran." 2010. He said, "What?" He didn't believe his own ears. "You're saying that United States is giving Israel a green light to attack Iran, the nuclear facilities, and you think Israel should not do that?" I said, "Yes." You know why? He said, "Why?" I said, "Because of three reasons. Again, in a humble manner, I'm not familiar with all the Israeli Air Force capabilities, but I tend to believe that Israel is incapable, definitely in 2010, maybe even today, to exterminate all those scattered facilities, underground deck in Iran. Israel can harm some of them, maybe even destroy one, but this would not back the Iranians from their efforts to gain the nuclear bombs. Actually, it will fasten their appetite and maybe even their capabilities, and would not be strategic success in this regard. Second, I said, I know exactly what would be the day after. They would use all their proxies, especially Hezbollah, but all their proxies in order to attack Iran in an unparalleled manner in modern history. And third, I've said, yes, nuclear Iran is an existential threat to Israel. Israel cannot live with such a threat, but the whole region cannot live with such a threat. And the Sunni countries, Saudi Arabia, they need to be concerned as Israel. And I don't really understand, why do you think that Israel should take those hot potatoes for the whole region, maybe the whole world, pay the enormous price And all of that because we got a yellow light from United States. Thank you. But that's not the solution to the problem. And then he said, so what's the solution of the problem? I said, you need to build a second NATO. You, United States, need to build a second NATO. The first NATO was aimed to contend with the USSR. The second NATO need to be to contend with the biggest villain in modern times, Rag State, very dangerous Islamic Republic of Iran. It's an American task. You should call Israel and demand from Israel to contribute as much as possible to that second NATO. The same thing with other regional countries, also Western countries, and all together, we need to wipe up the capability of the nuclear capability of Iran. What was true in 2010, in my view, is also true today.
Okay, Boaz, thank you. We have a couple of questions from Henry Urgas, our friend in Paris. He asks, what is your view, Boaz, of Hamas's remaining military capability, and to what extent has it been durably long-term degraded?
Hamas lost up to 95% of the military capability. Hamas was a tactical problem on the 6th of October, no more than that. And it's definitely a tactical problem today, almost, I would say, neglectable problem today. It doesn't mean that Hamas cannot, once Israel would leave the Gaza Strip, and if Israel would not find a way to change their presence there with another presence of a military presence of another entity or an alliance or other reliable partner, Hamas will rebuild. It will take them a few years. It will take them a decade or two. Definitely, Iran will do whatever they can in order to fund that and to give them, again, the weapons which are needed. Egypt didn't deliver until now. I don't know if they will deliver in the future. Hopefully they would, but who knows? So Hamas is an idea. Hamas is the Muslim Brotherhood movement. And if we have today, more than 2 million people or 1.5 million people in Gaza, I have a rough guess that 70-80% of them support Hamas, and they reproduce. And instead of Sinwar, we will have another Abu that will rise up and would take over. Until we will have peace with our enemies.
Do we know who has replaced Sinwar already or not?
Right now, the belief is that this is going to be a triumvirate, or maybe even 4 or 5 people. The responsibilities that were held by Sinwar, he was leading the military branch in Gaza. He was leading the political branch in Gaza, and this is going to be divided into different figures. Probably Khalid Mashal will take the political lead in Qatar, and his deputy Hayat Haya, he would take the military branch. He's also not in Gaza right now. Also, we believe that another figure, his brother Muhammad Sinwar, will be the immediate successor in Gaza, and would take the remains of Hamas military branch and try to activate them.
Apparently, he's even worse than Yahya Sinwar.
Yeah, between those two villains, it's very difficult to decide who's worst. But definitely, he deserves the same fate as his brother. Now, going back to your question, Ellen, I'm not concerned with Hamas anymore. It doesn't mean that Hamas would not be able, as it is as we speak, able to launch a rocket here, a rocket there. We need to end the war in Gaza. We need to bring, in my view, some kind of a presence of this second NATO that need to simultaneously be built, because this is the mutual interest of Saudi Arabia, of the Gulf countries, of Egypt, of Jordan, of Israel, to see to it that Hamas will not be again the ruler of Gaza and become a strong proxy of Iran. And that's the time to do that. And they would invest the money in order to rebuild Gaza. And the one who has the money to rebuild Gaza is the one that will be the ruler of Gaza in the future.
Thank you, Boaz. Henry has another question. Under what conditions, if any, and with what sort of mandate would multilateral forces be viewed by Israel as credible in Gaza and Lebanon?
I think it will be credible if Israel will be part of it. So I don't think that it should be an external effort. Again, if it would have been up to me, what I would do as the Israeli Prime Minister, I would come forward and say, okay, we achieved our goals in Gaza. We are prepared to end the war in exchange for the hostages. We are prepared to leave Gaza in exchange of a sustainable military force that would prevent Gaza from being taken again by Hamas. But we are saying that we believe that this is the time to build the second NATO that we all talked about. By the way, the second NATO already has been built in praxis in 19th of April, the first attack, and also in the attack that Albert and I have witnessed. This second NATO was activated in order to protect Israel. We had Jordanian pilots, we had Saudi pilots, we had Emirate elements, we had American, we had Israeli working together in order to thwart the Iranian attack. It's there. We need to officially announce that. We need to officially assign this military alliance to stand against Iran and its proxies in the Middle East. And as such, this alliance should send their forces into Gaza in order to let the Israeli military get out of Gaza and rebuild Gaza altogether. It's workable. It can be done. It should be done. It's in the interest, the mutual interest of all the key players that I've mentioned.
I just promoted Henry. Hello, Henry.
You got your microphone off, Henry?
Henry, you can put your mic on.
I have. Thank you very much, Albert.
Hello, Henry. And I want to introduce you to Boaz. Boaz, meet Henry. Henry is sitting in Paris. And you've got a wonderful Aboriginal art in the background.
I see.
Henry is one of our great journalists in Australia, and he's a great economist as well. And so he always has interesting viewpoints. Do you have any other questions for Boaz, Henry? Or any remark that you'd like to make?
On your question, on your proposal in terms of a regional NATO, it seems to me that one issue must be that when the original NATO was formed, there was substantial public support for it in virtually all of the member countries. There were divisions within them, but nonetheless, by and large, public opinion was in favor. Isn't that a significant difference relative to the situation in the countries you listed, where the regimes and the governments may certainly have the view that such an organization would be useful, but to what extent would that be politically feasible given the views of the population?
Brilliant question, Henry, seriously. You rightly noted that there is a difference. Not everywhere. I think in the Gulf countries, there is popular support to such an idea because they are in the immediate eye of the storm. They are the first one that will be swallowed by Iran once they would become nuclear. As for Saudi Arabia, I think there is a difference between the attitudes of the Saudi regime and the public in Saudi Arabia. And this is why you could hear MBZ saying that he needs Israel to do something, even if it's orally, to show that this process would lead to some kind of a solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in order to persuade his own people to support such an effort. It does complicate things, I agree with you, but it doesn't prevent this from happening, because we are talking about regimes which are not Western regimes. The first NATO was relying on Western regimes, democratic regimes, that you couldn't do anything without the popular support. These regimes are quite used to do things without popular support, if they believe in it, that this is in the best interest of the people or even their regime altogether. So from an Israeli point of view, this is a very positive change, that we have a growing number of leaders in the region that believe that this is a good idea. It didn't happen a few years ago, definitely not decades ago. And I'm a great believer that once you have a leader that believes in a goal, he can, if he wants to, influence their own people to maybe shift their minds and change it and support it down the road as well. Israel would need to contribute its own share to build the public support in some of those countries.
And I think, don't forget that you can substitute the word NATO with the word Abraham Accord. And in actual fact, it goes back to October 7, and October 7 was there to stop the momentum of the Abraham Accord for a very good reason. That's the reason.
Exactly. I do believe that the 7th of October was aimed in order to prevent the enlarging the Abraham Accords, because Saudi Arabia was on the way to normalization with Israel, and this is the first anchor for building this second NATO, military NATO against Iran. That was the reason why Iran actually supported, in my view, also initiated the Hamas attack against Israel.
Any more questions?
Can I ask
Of course.
a follow-up question? You outlined your views in terms of what needed to be done in Gaza, including reaching some kind of framework agreement and having a process for its implementation. Where do you think the current Israeli government stands in that respect? What do you believe is its thinking in terms of the next steps with respect to Gaza?
Till now, I succeeded not to put my feet on any mine, but now you drag me into a minefield. So I would not shy out from the question, Henry. It's a very problematic government, in my view. It's problematic for different reasons. First of all, if I would bring Bibi Netanyahu to a closed room and ask him to have a transparent and open discussion, I think he would think along the lines of what I've said. He would never admit that. Publicly would never say that. It's against his own base. But mainly it's against a very important fragment of the extreme right in his own government. I'm talking about Ben Gvir, I'm talking about Smotrich, and so on and so forth. And unfortunately, he tied his political future with them. And they are the ones who are calling the shots. The ideas that I expressed here would be regarded by them as the edge of betrayal in Israel. I use harsh words. since I have some history in Israel, maybe they won't refer to me as somebody who betrays Israel, but they would argue that this would betray the blood that Israel has spread, the Israeli soldiers have spread in Gaza, and it would let Hamas rebuild in Gaza in the future, and so on and so forth. And their conclusion is that there is only one solution to the problem. We need to occupy Gaza and settle Jews in Gaza. By the way, if you would ask them, they think also the same thing about southern Lebanon, and maybe in the future, Western Syria, and definitely parts of Jordan, and so on and so forth. I'm not taking part in this overall belief. I think this is illusions, dangerous illusions of Messianic Jews that in a way would promote the same kind of Armageddon that the Shiites in Tehran believes in, and they're leading to that place.
Boaz, you made reference to the drone attack and the degree that an international coalition was brought together to bring those down. They weren't very efficient, and lots of the missiles the other day also failed. As we've seen in Ukraine, Russian defense technology has failed over and over again. Do you think the Iranian, let's call it defense, technology is up to scratch?
We need to differ between the drone attacks and the rockets and missiles attacks. Those are two different ball games, although in the 19th of April, the first Iranian attack against Israel, it all was synchronized together. They've launched the drones 10 hours before the attack was actually occurred in Israel. It took them 10 hours to fly to Israel. And then the cruise missiles 2 hours, and then the ballistic missiles 10 minutes.
12 minutes, yeah.
They all were synchronized to fall in Israel together. I think that Israel has an impressive air defense capability in reference to the cruise missiles and the ballistic missiles. Of course, it's far from sealing the Israeli skies. It definitely has something that has to do with Henry knowledge, and this is an enormous economical toll for Israel, maybe unbearable toll if you take into consideration the almost unlimited capabilities, rockets and missiles capabilities of Israeli enemies led by Iran. But the drones is a different ballgame. The drones is a very, very primitive type of weapon. And because of its primitive nature, the Israeli, actually, as far as I know, the international air defense find it difficult to deal with. It will be solved sooner than later, in my view. It will be solved with the probably with the development of new technologies, and also with primitive measures like Vulcan cannons and others. But for the time being, it succeed to infiltrate to Israel, it succeed to infiltrate to Ukraine, and to cause harm. I tend to believe that the harm is quite limited. One of these drone attacks was not far from my house, and the damage is very limited, although it was a direct hit. But if we need to live with that, we would live with that, because dealing right now with Hezbollah and in the near future with Iran is a must, and this is a price that we have to pay, and we are paying that.
Yeah, and a few days ago there was a drone attack on an Israeli base. I think it was a Golani base, and yes. I think some 20 soldiers were killed, 60 was seriously injured. So it can be devastating.
It can be devastating. It depends what is the type of compound that you are staying in. As far as I know, it was not concrete. The walls, the ceiling was not from concrete. And that's why it was devastating. But it's definitely something we cannot permit it would keep on happening in Israel.
Yeah, of course. And that, of course, forces the Israelis to do some research. And I'm sure there will be an answer to that, which will hopefully provide an edge to Israel. Again, I certainly hope so. Boaz, I really want to thank you for your time. I know that you have to resume your day. It's you're starting your day in Israel. We're finishing ours in Australia. And I want to thank you all for participating. And certainly you, Boaz, I would like to give you my thanks, and everyone join me to give you their thanks as well.
For having me, Albert, and good to see you, Ellen and Henry, and keep on with the good help and support that you are helping Israel. It's crucial for us. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Boaz.